Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. It's Kimberley Roberts of SolefulYin, and I'm back for another episode on the Yinning at Life podcast. And for those of you that are watching over on YouTube, this is my official first video podcast episode. Yeah, other than my trailer, but I don't really count that as an episode, right? But if you're watching on YouTube, my first 7 episodes are actually just audio only. But moving forward, everything is going to be on video. So guess what? You get to see me here live in my, well, this is a really multi-purpose area that I have. So I'm here in my condo. I'm so blessed because I get to use this room, and I use the word get because get is so abundant and it's so powerful. But I get to do my reflexology business in this room. I get to record all my podcast episodes in this room. I get to record videos for YouTube for my Yin Yoga classes in this room. And I also get to, I'm on a get to thing, right? And I'm going to get to the episodes in just a couple of minutes. But I also get to film all of my content for my online yoga platform in this room. So I'm so blessed. And I'm so excited to be here because today's topic, we are going to talk about the B word. And I don't mean bullshit, although that word's probably going to come up a couple of times. So if you are listening to this and your kiddos are around, maybe you might want to put the earbuds in so that they don't hear that word. And I might drop an F-bomb here or there too. So just warning you. But of course, my content always specifically says whether it is explicit or not, right? So you can always check that. All right, so the B word that we're going to talk about today is boundaries. And the other one is balance. But really, we're going to talk about boundaries, okay? And how setting boundaries is so important. Where most people think, okay, well, I'm just going to strive for balance. But actually striving for the balance doesn't really land and work properly if you're not setting boundaries in the first place, right? Like I say, like boundaries is like the new black, right? Balance is kind of like outstream. So setting boundaries. This is really important for so many reasons. Just for your own personal health, it's important to set boundaries, right? And with those boundaries, there's a lot of things that happen. So there's expectations, our own expectations that we place regarding our boundaries, but also other people's expectations. And I want to talk about that. The other thing I want to talk about, and I want to tie this in with Yin Yoga, and you know me, I'm always going to tie something in these episodes about Yin Yoga, is how what's the word I want to use? I guess how I interpret my boundaries based on my emotions. And we'll talk about that, okay? So setting boundaries, so important for your own mental health, right? Your own physical health, your own emotional health as well. But it's also for the other people in your life too. Because when you set boundaries, there's an expectation that, okay, well, like if you're going to set a boundary, say with your kids in terms of how much time they spend with you versus like on the computer or on their tablets or on their phones or whatever, right? And you want quality time for yourself too. So yes, there's balance that you got to play in there, but you also got to set some boundaries of like, okay, well, you know what? Like, let's have an hour of time together. And then whatever boundary you want to set for your kids regarding like how much time they spend on social media and that sort of thing, and set all of that. I'm not a parent, so I'm not I'm not really good at dishing out advice about that kind of stuff. But setting an expectation of like, okay, well, I'm carving out whatever amount of time for myself every single day. When you let the other people in your life know about that, well, that's really important, because then they know that, hey, you know what, like Alexa, for example, she has set a boundary of like, you know what, every single day I have whatever X amount of time that's just for me. And I do whatever I want with that time, but it's my time. And there's an expectation that is set that, guess what? I'm not interrupted during that time. Unless, you know, like, God forbid there was a massive emergency, well, yes, but otherwise, like, that time is for me. When you don't let people around you know about that, well, then they're kind of in the dark, and all of a sudden, if they interrupt you during your time, then guess what happens? Well, they get frustrated, probably get a little bit pissed off. You get frustrated, you get pissed off, but you haven't set a communication boundary right there, right? Like, you haven't discussed that. So that is why it's so important to, when you're setting these boundaries, that you communicate with the people in your life regarding these boundaries. If there's a boundary of like, you know what, we only eat popcorn twice a week, because you know what, like, any more than that, it's not good for our health, or whatever it is. Like, we set a boundary around food, not unhealthy boundaries around food. I'm talking about just setting realistic expectations, right? Around, okay, well, you know what, we're not going to eat processed food every single day of the week. In setting boundaries, what I have found from my own experience, especially around relationships, is that I used to be really bad at communicating it. So I'd be like, oh yeah, this hour is for me, but then I would actually forget to tell the people. Or like, I run my own business, so I set boundaries for myself of how much time do I spend answering emails per day, or answering questions. Like, at the end of my workday, my phone goes down, my computer shuts down, and I have an automated email that goes out if someone answers something during my non-business hours. That way, the communication is set, right? Like, I have sent out the email saying, hey, by the way, you know, like, I respond between these hours, you can expect an answer within this time frame. And so the person receiving that information has a clear understanding. There's a communication that's been set there. And that's one of the biggest problems with setting boundaries is, again, it's the lack of communication, right? And then that sets us off emotionally. And that's a part that I want to talk about, is the emotional part. I also want to talk about, when we're setting boundaries, there's a detachment process that happens with that. We detach from how other people perceive our boundaries. I have no control over whether Jen, my friend, gets upset or angry or frustrated or whatever by a boundary that I set with her. I have no control over her reaction. I only have the control over my reaction, my response, right? But if I don't detach from however she responds to my boundary, then guess what? Well, she gets frustrated, she gets angry, the same thing happens to me. And that's not good. Like, we don't want that, right? So when you are able to detach from what other people will think, like, if, for example, I'm like, well, you know what, I need 2 hours every single day for myself, and my weekends are for me. Well, if one of my friends or family members comes in and is like, what do you mean you need 2 hours every single day? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why do you need that much time? Why do you need the whole weekend? Like, I'm just using that as an example, but here's the thing. I can control how I respond to that. And my response is always in my highest good. but it's also in the highest good for that other person too. Because here's the thing, when we don't set boundaries, we run on either half empty tank or a completely empty tank. We're not serving ourselves. We're not filling our own cup. We're getting resentful because we're not taking care of our own needs. And then that energy is projected out to everybody else. And then you get that back. So they project like frustration and irritation with you, and you turn around and you feel that energy. And guess what? You pick that energy up and now you're frustrated and you're pissed off. You're angry. So detachment is hard because we're creatures of, for one thing, connection. And most of us are like, well, I want you to like me, or I want you to love me, and I want you to be okay with this, right? But you're not here on this planet to make everybody else happy. You got to make yourself happy first. You got to fill your needs first. And this is where, when you set boundaries with other people, also set boundaries with yourself, that your needs are met, and then you're able to serve people at a higher level. Does that make sense? Like, you can comment whether you're watching on YouTube or you're on one of my audio platforms. You can always comment, send me a response, a review, whatever. I love to hear from you guys. So I want to talk about the emotional aspect of this, because here's often what happens when we set a boundary, especially if it's something new, right? Like, say you've made a decision to change your eating habits. You want to eat more healthy, you want to reduce alcohol and caffeine consumption. And so your friends, we always, like the friends always get together, say like every Monday night or something like that, for cocktails or whatever, right? Some kind of drinks. So you go, and all your friends are ordering their cocktails, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna have a sparkling mineral water with lime or something like that, something non-alcoholic. Next thing you know, your friends are like, what? What the hell are you doing? Why aren't you having a glass of wine like the rest of us are? And you're like, well, I've set a new boundary for myself. Like, I want to have a healthier lifestyle. So I'm choosing not to drink right now. And then next thing you know, your friend's like, yeah, but we do this every Monday night, and we always have a glass of wine together. Like, now it's not the same anymore because you're not having a glass of wine. And it's like, in my mind, I'm thinking, does it really matter what I'm drinking? Like, what's the important part here? The important part is that we're getting together. We're having some fun. We're hanging out. Who cares what we're drinking, right? But if you go into that, say next time your friends get together and you've made this decision, but you haven't communicated it, you communicate it beforehand, right? Be like, you DM everybody or you text everyone and say, hey, by the way, yeah, I'm in. I'm not drinking at this time because I'm choosing to change my lifestyle, and this is something that I'm incorporating. But I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys and hanging out. Right? So you set the tone, you have the boundary, they know, and then however they respond is however they respond. But you don't need to take that on. But if you're not fully grounded and taking care of your needs, then you are going to probably get upset, and you probably are going to get frustrated. And this is where Yin Yoga can really help, because you're probably thinking, what has Yin got to do with that? Well, I'll tell you. When I end up taking on the energy, the emotion of somebody else's response to a boundary that I'm setting in my life, Then I get onto my mat and I check in and I'm like, okay, what am I feeling? Am I feeling frustrated, angry? Okay, well then I need to work on the liver meridian channel. Am I feeling maybe worried or, or nervous about expressing myself to my friends because I'm not sure how they're gonna respond? So I'll work like stomach and spleen. If I'm feeling sadness around how my friends or family or whoever responded to my boundary that I've set, then like if there's sadness around that, around my heart, then I'm going to work on the heart meridian. Sometimes there's loss when we set boundaries. Sometimes the people that are in our life are not at the same place in their journey as we are, and we lose them as a result of the boundaries that we set for ourselves because they just don't understand. And so maybe there's a loss that you're dealing with there. And so you would want to work the lung meridian channel. If there's fear because you're afraid of how others are going to perceive you, or you're afraid of maybe losing them or them not understanding you, then you would want to work the kidney meridian channel. You see, like, so depending on how I'm feeling around the boundaries that I'm setting, if there's anything that feels kind of what I call sticky, and that's like the emotional side, like if there's anything emotionally that feels off, and then I check in with that emotion. It's like, okay, well, what am I feeling? All right, I'm actually feeling frustrated about this because I set this clear boundary with Amanda, as an example, and Amanda got frustrated because she doesn't understand why I don't respond to her text messages between 12 and 1 p.m. during the week. Well, that's my time to have my lunch and decompress from my workday. So now all of a sudden, because she's frustrated and she's sort of brought that energy onto me and I'm feeling frustrated, then I'm going to get on my mat and I'm going to work liver meridian channel, because the liver organ system is the organ system that holds the emotion of frustration, irritation, anger, resentment, even rage. And all of those emotions that I talk about here, they're not bad, they're not good in Chinese medicine. They're indicators of how you feel, right? Like, what is your feeling inside your body? And what kind of energy are you creating out of those emotions? And then this is where the practice of yin comes in. And the beautiful thing about the practice is, guess what it brings you? Balance, right? Balance on so many levels. So if there's physical stuff going on with your body because of, the emotion that you're experiencing, great, you get to clear that. If there's mental or emotional dis-ease or distress, great, you get to clear that out too when you're on the mat. This is the beautiful thing about yin, is that it is such a fully embodied practice. It is not just about that stretch, right? It's not about just getting on the mat, hanging out in a pose for 5 minutes, and then feeling all loose and flexible afterwards. Like, sure, that's great, but it's really about creating the balance. But when we set boundaries, especially if we're really new to setting boundaries, and I know this is what happened with me when I first started setting boundaries with people. And of course, for one thing, they were shocked. First of all, it's like, what? Wait, what? What do you mean you're set? What do you mean you don't respond during this time? I texted you at 8 o'clock this morning. I used to get a response from you just like that. How come now I don't get a response until after 9 a.m.? Well, it's because I set a boundary for myself. I don't check my phone until 9 a.m. I don't respond to anything until 9 a.m. And then the person's like, what? Oh, okay, well, I kind of wish you would have told me in advance. So that's where I say the communication is so, so important. You set a boundary for yourself, and the moment you set that, you communicate it with the people in your life that you feel would need to do it. Now, if you're talking about like from a business perspective, that would be like sending out an email, like a corporate email to your clients saying, you know what, like I don't answer emails or my phone or text messages, before 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or whatever time zone you're in. And I only respond between this time and this time. And if it's on the weekends, you will not expect to get a response from me until Monday, like, or however it is that you want to run your business, right? But as long as you communicate that, then your end is clear. Your energy around that is clear. There's nothing sticky around that. Where we get into trouble is when we don't communicate and then things get sticky. But when I set the expectations in advance with my clients, then they know. And they're like, there's no reason for them to get frustrated or angry or whatever, because they know what's going on. They're not sitting there wondering, she's not responding to me. Is she upset with me? She doesn't want to talk to me. Maybe she doesn't care about me as a client. Like all the ruminating thoughts that go through the head, right? Like none of that shit happens because you communicated. Communication is key when it comes time to setting boundaries. Now, that also means with yourself. Communicating with your needs and honoring them and respecting them and adhering to them. So if you set a boundary and you're like, I don't check my phone until 9 a.m., then don't be checking your phone before 9 a.m., right? Like, because if you start to wibble and wobble around that boundary, you're just setting a foundation that's very cracked and isn't very solid. And if you're doing that with other people in your life, then they're going to start to get confused. And they're like, but last week you said you don't answer your phone until before 9 a.m. And now this week, all of a sudden, I texted you and I wasn't expecting an answer till after 9. And all of a sudden it was like 10 after 8 and you texted me. Like, now what? Like, now I'm confused. What's going on? Did the rules change? No, you stick with what you create, unless that boundary for some reason isn't working at some point. And if it's not, then guess what you do? You communicate again, right? This is all to avoid the emotional distress and suffering that ends up being created with the people in our life, the relationships that we're in, and with ourselves. This is why it's so important to set these boundaries. And when we set them and the communication is clear, then there's balance. But balance is really hard to achieve if you don't have boundaries around your life and around your work. Like, balance requires that first of all, you have to define what is balance for you. So for some people, balance is like, well, I only work like 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. That's it. That's, I can't handle anymore. Maybe for some people, balance is, okay, well, you know what? I only answer emails 1 hour per day. And it's between this time and that's it. Maybe balance for some people is, I need to walk out in nature every single day. That helps me feel balanced. For me, meditation, breath work, acupressure, reflexology, and yin yoga. Those are my 5. I consider those to be my 5 pillars, the foundation upon what I set my life on, but it's also the foundation for everything in my life, right? And so when I'm feeling out of balance, out of alignment, I look to these 5 pillars and it's like, okay, what can I do today? What do I need today to help me create that balance and to feel nourished again in my body, but also in my nervous system too, right? Like, and in my mind, because it's all connected. And if I start to look at, well, why am I out of balance? 99% of the time, it's because I've broken a boundary that I've created. That's the reality. that's what happens most of the time, is that we give up on the boundary. Yeah. So it's you. Yeah. Yeah. And it's about taking accountability for that. And sometimes we don't want to do that. We don't want to be accountable because it's just easier to look elsewhere, right? Oh, the reason why, I'm not in balance is because of, I don't know, Paula last week did this and now it set me off. No. You always have control over how you respond to any situation or circumstance or event or experience that you're in. You always have control over how you react. You do not have control sometimes, in some cases, of what actually happens in your life, a certain circumstance, event, experience, situation. You might not have control over that happening, but you certainly 100% have control of how you respond to that. And your response is everything. And so when you respond, when you take the time to respond properly, and I'll tell you, most of the times when we kind of just, fly off the handle and respond too quick, been in there, done that? I have, yes, yeah. For those of you listening on Spotify, I'm waving my hand up here because I have done that many times. Yeah. But now I'm like, I realize I get out of balance really quick when I react too quickly to something, especially something that I can't take back. But when I set clear boundaries for myself and what I need, and I make sure that my needs are met and that I'm nourished on all levels, so mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, spiritually, like when all of those areas are fulfilled, and I have clear boundaries around all of that and what I need in all of those areas, and I've communicated that, and I know I keep bringing up the word communicate, because it's so important, because almost every single instance of why people respond in a way that's not favorable is because you haven't communicated with them in the first place. People can't read your mind. I mean, as much as sometimes we think like, don't you already know that about me? Like, duh, you should know that. It's like, well, I can't read your mind. I don't have a crystal ball over your head going, oh yeah, Kimberly's thinking about that. Yeah, I knew that already. No. We're so caught up in our own life that we don't have time to be thinking about what other people are thinking, right? So, yin, again, is such a catalyst because it can also help you create boundaries. Because sometimes you're like, I don't know what boundary I need to set. I don't really know. I don't know what I need. And the reason why is because we're not actually taking enough time to get quiet, to contemplate, to be still, to pause, because we're just like the hamster on the wheel running round and around and around and around and around, right? Autopilot life. It's almost like we're robots, right? Wake up in the morning, press this, do, 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 do. Now I start doing that, do, 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 do. Now I start doing this, do, 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 do. Oh, end of the day, plug this, and go to bed. And that's life. So when you get on your mat and you get still in these poses, it's almost like you got a light bulb going on over your head, going, oh, well, I just realized in this particular area of my life, things are really out of whack. right? Like they're really sticky. They're really out of alignment. Why? Like that's the first thing I ask myself. When I'm out of balance, it's like, why? Oh, well, I haven't done this. Why haven't I done that? Well, because I didn't set a boundary around it. I didn't take time to even think about what I needed, right? But the time on your mat isn't just about going there to get bent and flexy. Like, if that was the only reason why every single person did yin, well, then we'd all be on Cirque du Soleil, right? Performing, because we'd all be so uber flexible, like Gumbies. But that's not the purpose. When we get on the mat and we get still, the answers come to us. And often the answers that you're not even looking for come to you. Because you're still. Your mind is getting quiet. Your body is being still. The body craves to be still, believe it or not. I mean, our mind is the thing that drives our body to want to move all the time. It's the mind either getting bored or restless or irritated or something. And the body is just following suit and going, oh yeah, oh, irritated, yeah, okay, I gotta move, oh yeah, angry, oh yeah, I gotta move, whatever, right? Like, yeah, sometimes we're in a pose and it's like, okay, this is uncomfortable, and now it's like actually physically painful. Well, that's something different, right? Like that's a whole other area. But a lot of the times it has nothing to do with the physical body. It's our mind going, I don't really like the fact that this is so quiet and everything's so still. And now I got time to think and look at things. Well, that's not new. Or this is new, actually. I'm not used to this shit. Like, now what do I do? Right? And you start having this inner dialogue with yourself that's like not known. It's not comfortable. And so then you start to fidget. And then you get restless. And then you just get frustrated and you come out of the pose. But if you can prop yourself up properly, and let me tell you, I am a big proponent of propping your body in yin, using whatever, blankets, bolsters, blocks, straps, towels, whatever you got, right? Extra clothing, whatever it is, to help support your body so that your body feels safe. When your body feels safe, your mind will start to follow suit and feel that same energetic vibe, right? And then when your mind is feeling safe, then your nervous system is feeling safe. And then things begin to lighten up in terms of like what to contemplate and what to look at. And this is where you can start to come up with like the boundaries of setting. Well, okay, I realize, I'm spending way too much time on social media every day. And not only am I spending so much time, it's actually draining my energy being on these platforms, just scrolling, for several hours a day. It's sometimes demotivating. And it's also taking me away from being productive, doing other things, like say in my work. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, if I take less time, if I set a boundary for myself and I'm like, okay, I'm spending 1 hour or whatever it is, 45 minutes, whatever it is, you pick it, that amount of time on social media platform, and you give yourself that boundary. And after that, it's like, I'm out, I'm done. Then you've freed up an extra whatever amount of time that you can use to be productive, say in your work. Especially if like you're falling behind and you're feeling stressed out because you don't feel like you have enough time in the day to get all the work done. It's like, well, you know what? We all have the same amount of hours in a day. Everybody does. There's nobody out there who's got more than 24 hours in a day. Nobody. We all got the same time to do the same amount of shit, right? But how you allocate your time is so important. And one of the ways that you can properly allocate your time is to set boundaries. Especially around the things that, I'm going to say this with so much respect, but the shit that really doesn't matter. Like scrolling on social media for like 4 hours. No judgment here, people. I am not at all placing any judgment if you are listening to this going, no, I spend 4 hours on social media. Okay. I'm just saying, like, if you want a beautiful life, I said this in the trailer. If you watched the trailer on YouTube, I said, a beautiful life starts with a beautiful mind. When you set boundaries for yourself and with other people in your life, you know, you're setting a beautiful landscape in your mind, one that's peaceful, joyful, happy, free, right? And when your mind feels all of that vibe, you're truly yinning at life. That's the vibe that you have. Then you really truly are creating a beautiful life for yourself, like an absolutely beautiful life. Oh my God, we're already like 35 minutes. I'll tell you, man, when I get on here, I can talk. I can talk all day long. I could be here for hours. But I am going to wrap this up for you guys. So to recap, setting boundaries. Set them. Take the time to contemplate. What do you need to set boundaries around? Work, personal life, your relationships, food, activity, whatever. Your call. Take time. Figure out, do I need to set boundaries? One way, if you're like, I don't know where to set boundaries, is look where you are out of balance. Look at your life where things are not going the way you want them to. And then start to ask yourself the questions. What would setting a boundary look like? Write it out. And then once you know, like, okay, well, this is the boundary then, what would it feel like to experience that boundary? What would that be like in your life? How would that play out in your relationships with other people? How would that play out in your own body? But take the time to set the boundaries. Take the time to get on your mat and to do the introspective work. Not just hang out and get bendy, right? Like, that's the least, in my opinion, and I know there will be people out there that'll be listening going, I don't agree with you, and that's okay. Everybody is absolutely entitled to their own opinions on things. But I will tell you, for me, the stretch is the least interesting part of this practice. It is just a given. I don't even give it a thought. And so for me, it is literally all about, how can I use this tool? Because I think of yin as a tool, right? Just like my other tools, breath work, acupressure, reflexology, meditation. Those are all tools. Those are, you know, part of my 5 pillars, right? My foundation of creating my beautiful life. And I'll tell you that when I was in my abusive marriage, especially towards the end of it, when things really started getting really awful, like downright awful, I had realized at one point that I had not set clear boundaries in that relationship, given what was going on in it at that point. And so I was giving too much of myself to him and completely neglecting my own needs. And I began to get even more resentful because of it. So it's so important to create boundaries. You will suffer so much less if you do. Take it from somebody who And I say this with no regret at all, because I always say that everything happens in divine timing. But I wish I had set boundaries in my life, especially in my marriage, a long time ago. Because the reality is, I probably would have left it a lot sooner. If I had set a boundary of putting myself first before putting him first, I would have left sooner. But no regret. Absolutely none. But you see, having that boundary now clearly defined for myself, I know that in the next relationship that I'm in any relationship that I'm in, whether it's a romantic relationship or not, my relationships already with people have changed because I have boundaries. Because I've realized that if I do not take care of myself first, nobody in my life is going to benefit. And that's why it's so important to set these boundaries. And when you set them, you create balance. And when you create balance, you are setting up your mind beautifully, and you are setting up your life beautifully, and you are all towards rocking that yinning at life vibe. So that is today's episode. If you are watching me on YouTube, just know all of the recordings will be up on YouTube. I don't put any fancy music and all that stuff in there. It's just the raw data. That's all you get from me. And please subscribe, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify. Or I'm also on iTunes. I am on iHeart, Amazon Music, and what's the other one? Google Podcasts, which is going away eventually anyway, because it's all moving on to YouTube. But please feel free to subscribe and sign up for notifications. I would love a review if you feel aligned to that. And if you have any comments, please, you can put them in the show notes. I always put in a question and answer box in there. And if you have a topic that you're like, I really want Kimberley to jam about this, you can put that in a comment if you want, or you can also email or DM me through Instagram, or send me, good old-fashioned email to hello@solefulyin.com through my website, and let me know if there's something that you really want me to jam about in the context, of course, of like something related to Yin Yoga or Chinese medicine meridian theory, emotions, mindset, reflexology. I haven't really talked about that yet here, but I will start to bring that in. Acupressure. So anything that is related to creating that yinning at life rock and vibe of yours, please feel free. If you want to practice with me, you can head over to my online platform. I have a plethora of content up there that you can dive into and explore. And I have live stream classes every single week that you can come and hang out with me live, which is really quite a vibe. I have to say, there's really something about practicing together, even though we're not in the same room. There's just a collective energy of like, we're all here as like-minded individuals looking to create our best life. So thanks again for pressing play, and I'll see you in the next episode.